All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. Looking forward to, telling you guys about my 6 lessons from the last 6 years of player-first community management. I'm the CEO of Gamerspeak. We're relatively new. We're 6 years old, hence the 6 lessons. Thought I'd keep it easy like that. But I'll be throwing in all sorts of tidbits and different things throughout. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. We'll be answering questions after, hang out on LinkedIn, whatever we want to do. And thanks again for joining. So I'm going to start out telling you guys my story of how I got started. It's kind of a fun story with a bunch of VIPs and a trip to Dubai. Let's see, here we go. And it all started with Game of War. So what happened was in 2013, the game launched, and pretty quickly I downloaded the game. I was actually in Germany at the time, and it turns out that in Germany there's a lot less homework than there is in the US. So I had tons of free time, and it's freezing outside, so because it was in winter. So I downloaded Game of War, is on the top of the charts. Probably my second mobile game aside from Angry Birds. Obviously, 2 very different genres. Immediately got hooked on the Game of War, and started just trying to compete, spending a couple $100s, and trying to rank up into different alliances throughout the kingdom. And I got into the second strongest one at the time. And every time you log in, you can see these little gold gifts, alliance gifts. They're these little gold chests. And what that means is that somebody, when you are offline or online, if one of those pops up, they spend $100 in the game. And so I'd log in 5-6 times a day, and I would see 30 or 40 gold gifts show up each time I logged in, which, each one's is $100. So that's $3,000 to $4,000 every time I logged in. And just in my alliance of 100 people, they were spending tens of thousands a week. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't think it was real until I started meeting some of these people who were in finance and real estate. And then I found out that 2 of the guys were actually princes who lived in Jordan. And they're just these massive whales. And they were way stronger than everyone else. But the interesting thing is that none of them really knew how to play the game very well. And so we were actually losing about 10 people every week from our alliance. They would come in, they would spend $1,000 to $3,000. They would get attacked one time, and they would lose $2,000 worth of spend, all in troops, and then they would just quit the game. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because I'm out here trying to protect my investment of $500-$600 that I made in the last couple months, and these guys are just dropping thousands. And so yeah, then I was like, wow, this is actually pretty bad for the publisher as well. I'm sure they want these guys to stay, and they're making really stupid mistakes. I think I can help them out. So I started the classic fan site, and I started building relationships with these princes and these other VIPs across the kingdom, and saying, hey, how can we win? How can we work together? And they were like, well, there's a pretty low chance that we're actually going to become #1, because the other alliance in the kingdom that was the #1, they had one guy, and that one guy had more power than all of our 100 people combined. His name was Card RX, and he was just on a whole nother level. It was ridiculous. So anyway, we tried hard nonetheless, and I went out and I created a whole bunch of guides for our alliance. I got into the community, and was working with people and teaching people. And let's see here. Yeah, after about 6 months, we had 80,000 users going through the site. It is just me creating content, doing interviews with whales, really getting involved in the community, kind of becoming sort of an influencer, but not on any typical influencer platform, just creating a content on a website. But what was really interesting, and what I didn't happen, was by doing all that, I made these really, I got into the inner circles of these VIPs. And I found out that they were frequently talking about hey, we love this game. We really want to pay for things like this. We really don't want to pay for things like this. we don't mind spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we just want to spend it on the right things. And the publisher wasn't always, launching those things. They're often launching different things. And so it felt like the players were out of sync. And so a lot of what we do at Gamerspeak is bridging the gap of communication between the players and the publishers. And so when I found that out, and I said, okay, well, I have all these users. I'm going to reach out to Machine Zone and see if they want to work together, and see if, like, hey, I will relay this information to you guys, this detailed kind of authentic peer-to-peer feedback that doesn't typically go outside of these circles. Not revealing any private information, but just saying, hey, this is like, the players don't think you're listening to this type of feedback, so like let's communicate. And they're like, I don't know, at first, we're making $5 million a day. I don't think we we're good. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I understand. I'll just keep doing my thing over here. But as I kept going, so a few weeks passed, and then what happened is this guy here in the top right in the red shirt, this is Stay Alive 77, who dominated the game for 6 months straight. Easily spent millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on the game. Decided to have a retirement party, and it was 6 months dominating. He wanted to move on to other things, and so he actually invited myself and 3 other guys out of the hundreds of people that I knew in the game on an all expenses paid trip to Dubai. And so this is like my glory story of like starting my business, and I love it. It's fantastic. That's me on the left, obviously, and that's the tallest building in the world. We stayed in his apartment there, and yeah, and so it was really meaningful. I was like, wow, I didn't realize like my connection with him was so strong, and he would choose me out of all the other people that he knew. So I sent these pictures to MZ, and I said, no, look, I'm really on the inside. I think I can really help you guys and keep this community rolling, and help with like connecting you guys with the players. So they said okay, and then I got started, and that was the first deal. And ever since then, I've just been really specializing in connecting. So these are some of the games that we work with right now. Some of them are very big. I think one missing here is the 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross, which is doing great as well. And I think the important part to my background that I didn't really mention, but I've never worked at a development studio. I've never worked at a publisher. And I feel like that's obviously, I'm going to come from a very different angle. I'm just fully have been a player than I started this business. And so I'm kind of a former influencer as well. My background is in like free to play, mid to hardcore game genres. Personally, I also love FPS though, and track with those. And I have all sorts of relationships with tons of VIPs across all these various games, and the people who we hire, the people who are like me now in various games, and we work with them to create content and build community and relay feedback to the publisher. And so by extension, I'm very connected to the communities in a lot of games. And all right, so here we go. Point number 1, the community management mindset. I think you can see just by the graphic kind of where I'm headed here, but Amazon's got this customer-centric mindset. I think that when you're developing, you should have a player-centric mindset, which is relatively obvious and straightforward, but let's talk about like the details of what that really means. And I'll start off with 2 more stories because the stories are great and you'll remember them. These stories actually come from a friend of mine who works at a big AAA studio. I can't say which one. It's international. They make a lot of great games. And he has these really cool stories of how Epic and Proletariat listened extremely well to their players and ended up making great games. And so the first one, let's talk about Epic. That game came out first. And my friend, he made it into the pre-alpha Discord of the game. But what happened was his friend said, hey, come play this game. It's called Fortnite. You might have seen like the zombie version of the game, but it's not that. They're actually working on a new battle royale that's like, PUBG style, and it's like very different, and they're really listening to the players. You should come play the game. But you should get like the most expensive package, because that's the only way that you can get access to the game. It's $125 and you can buy the battle royale, which is hilarious. This is almost, I don't know if there's a single battle royale that's premium right now. But he was like, $125 is kind of steep. So then when it was on sale for 80, he picked it up, joined the Discord, and immediately was just blown away by the communication that was happening between the players and the publisher. It was like so much engagement. There's so much ideas being thrown out. But the biggest thing was that like the developers were constantly implementing very quickly some of the feedback that the players had. And if you've ever played Fortnite, it's like almost like, I'm pretty sure players came up with these ridiculous ideas like putting a golf cart in the game or a heat-seeking missile. And so he was just like so excited about it. He's like, this game's going to be so big. Like all these pre-alpha players are just loving it, and they're talking so much in the Discord, and they're inviting their friends and such like that. And so he writes up a report and recommends to his boss that they buy the company early stage before the battle royale was big. And his boss says, I don't know, PUBG really is the only company that can make this genre work. I don't really think anybody else is going to do it. It's so new, it's risky. And so he's all bummed, but he doesn't know at the time what Fortnite's going to become. And so Fortnite blows up, and he's like, oh my gosh, this would have been so crazy if we owned Epic. Who knows if it would have worked, but they had the money, that's for sure. And then, like a year later, Proletariat comes around. They want to make a game, Spellbreak, and they want players to act like a badass battle mage, is what the CEO says. And so then again, my buddy gets into the pre-alpha Discord, and he sees the same type of environment of just like tons of engagement, tons of player ideas being put into the game rapidly, even though the game was pretty janky. If you look at early YouTube videos from Spellbreak, you'll be like, wow, that was what the original game looked like. It looks way better now. And so he writes a report, makes it better this time, makes some of the adjustments he thinks might convince his boss more, and submits it in. And his boss says, the market's too saturated. These guys aren't going to get big. They don't have enough money, and all these excuses. And so unfortunately, he struck out twice, but hopefully he doesn't strike out a third time. And my point with those stories is that I think community feedback can be a leading indicator for the success of your game. And so don't underestimate that pre-alpha stage, and don't underestimate those early, really engaged users and their excitement about the game. And if it's there, leverage it. Use my stories and talk to your investors and raise money. Okay. Also, I think that both of those games had like a very long pre-alpha phase where they were able to get the game to product market fit before really blowing it up. So like, here's some questions to ask yourself. I'm going to go over these rather quickly. Questions to ask yourself to see if you're having the right kind of player-centric mindset. Are your new developments making players more and more excited to play the game? More and more excited, not wishy-washy, but more and more excited. Are you showing them empathy when they run into problems? A way that you can verify this is, are they like overtly negative, or are they like, hey, I understand it was a problem. Thanks for fixing it. I appreciate your response. I think it's pretty easy to determine if your community is responding that way or not. Okay, number 3, are you supporting content creators and allowing players to engage with your game outside of playing it? So the reason is because although I totally understand that you want players in your game like 100% of the day, it's unrealistic, and you don't even play a game 100% of the time. But if you look at your own probably behavior, you'll see that when you're outside of the game, you're still trying to engage with that game in some capacity, whether it's on a Discord or on Twitch or on Reddit, and you're in these other communities, and you want your game to stand out in those other communities as well, and to support those, so that when they're outside of the game, they're still in the ecosystem of your game. Lastly, are you removing bad actors from your official communities? I think that for the most part, the overtly negative bad actors are easy to remove, but it can be difficult when there are manipulative players being good sometimes and bad other times, and good sometimes and bad other times. And are they pushing your most useful and valuable influencers out of your game and out of your community? Excuse me. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The pitfall here is waiting too long to find solutions to player complaints until you're desperately trying to prevent the loss of revenue. So there's a couple of different things that can be happening here where you will fall into this pitfall. You're either not listening altogether, which is rare. You're listening, but you don't want to make a change. That's kind of frequent, and we'll talk more about how that becomes a reality. Or you're listening, but you don't know what to do. That's very difficult. You understand that there's an issue with the game or the way it works. You're not sure how to resolve it, whether that's technical or from a design perspective. And in this case, I recommend enlisting some really smart players to help generate some idea flow onto how to solve that problem if it's like a design perspective. Okay, so as for not listening but not wanting to make a change, here's like the most difficult situation where your data tells a different story than the community's feedback. And you think, well, I'm going to trust my data because it's quantitative. The qualitative stuff is less trustworthy. All right, let's test out a little bit. Let's give an example. So here's a case where I see this very regularly. A game launches an event. The players don't like the event and they're very clear about it, but they want the rewards and they want to try it out, so they engage with it. And maybe it's more expensive, but they give it a shot anyway. And they're very clear, we don't like this, we don't want to see it again, or we want it to change. But you as a developer hears that and looks at your data and says, well, we see more engagement and we see more money being spent. Okay, well then the event is run again, and all of a sudden all your metrics are down and you still have even more negative sentiment, and now you've lost trust and you've lost those KPIs have gone down. And so my argument is that I think in a lot of cases, feedback is a leading indicator of success of different elements of your game. And so trust it. And if you have qualms with it, whether you don't like it or your data says something different, don't minimize that player feedback, but dig in and try to figure out if there's any additional ways to make it a win-win solution where you can have some elements of the event that you like and still have and still make sure that your players like it as well, and you're making money. So don't compromise too much. Try to get that win-win. Okay, so number 2 is communities don't build themselves, and there's 2 really good ways to think about it. You have community by design and you have community by default. So breaking these down, what I typically see is community by default, where there's not enough planning in advance for how you're going to support your community. And you're just hoping, well, let's see if the game is a success first. So I think that I understand that resources are limited early on, but you don't necessarily have to limit your planning early on. I think that, let's go over to community by design. It's one that's planned, it's one that's nurtured, and there's 3 elements of nurturing. It's like a garden. You can think of your community like a garden, and there's 3 elements of it. You fertilize it in the beginning, which means you have a plan right at launch of the measures you will take to support your influencers and your fan communities, whether that be beta programs, giveaways, whether that be exposure as much as you can give to these early creators to encourage them to keep creating content, whether that be really valuing their feedback like Epic and Proletariat did, and things in the game and trying them out, even if you didn't think that they were as good of his idea, or if you don't think that great of an idea. And then, so that's kind of the beginning. There's not too much effort there, although beta programs can get a little bit difficult. GamerSpeak can help with some of that. Take a look at our site and see what we do for betas. A second is water. So you want to water your community as your game matures and as you get more resources. You should already have planned what you're going to do to water your community, but different elements of watering would be like working with your influencers to create cornerstone guides for your game that are like unofficial, but written by players, and they're really authentic and they're really relatable. Promoting videos and content that they create to the community, helping them grow their audience, helping them make a living and a lifestyle out of your game. Don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate the support that you can provide for free even to these people by giving them exposure and by boosting their ego and their awareness around the community. But we will talk about which type of people you should promote a little bit later, though. That is very important. And then the second thing on watering is I'm going to really harp on this throughout the presentation, but building a crew of influencers, various different types, which we'll cover later, of influencers that will inform you on the various different player sets in your community and help you with reactive feedback and proactive feedback. This crew is so essential to ensuring to reduce risk and ensure maximum. So the community by design with it like a code of conduct and really either I've seen, obviously we've all seen code of conduct not being enforced super well. It's difficult, it's time consuming, but if you want to nurture a community of really encouraging and positive play, it would be that crew. If somebody becomes toxic in your crew of influencers that you have, you definitely want to prune those people out. Because like I think as a player, if I go into an official community or even an unofficial one, and I really want to engage and find a place to be, like I want to feel like I belong there. There's nothing worse than somebody who like treats me like a noob as soon as I come in, which I am. But hey, welcome me in. I can learn. So I think if you don't do a lot of those things, you end up with a community by default, and you get, they can often be negative, harmful, hostile to new players. Also, they can be disloyal. And so disloyal here, I think I have this story here. Oh, okay. I'll cover a disloyalty story later. But if you don't support your influencers or your fan communities well, then they might leap to other games as soon as there's sort of a better option out there, because it's sad. It's unfortunate not to feel like you have a good relationship with the developers. If you do, it's a really encouraging thing, and it's something that I find to be rare with communities. So last thing on community by default is I can't tell you how many times I've talked to potential clients and existing clients, and they say, "Oh, we're ready for you to build us a community." I'm like, "Great, when's the game launching?" And they're like, "Next week." And I'm like, "What? What's your community plans?" "Well, you're our community plans." I'm like, "Okay, great. Well, we got a long way to go." We should have more time to plan, but we're gonna do our best with what we have. So that's like kind of a community by default. That's one way. Another way is like they just wait until the game going to be a success. If you launch it and it does well, okay, now let's start thinking about community. That's also a failure of community by default. Don't do that. Plan ahead as much as you can. So the pitfall here is not nurturing your community such that one day a Genshin Impact will come along and be the off-ramp for what you thought were your loyal players. Okay, here's the story I was looking for. This is it. My example here is like we know, you know, there's a game that was doing really well, and so well that there were a few influencers that came out, and in like 2 months they had hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers, which is incredible. I've like almost never seen things like that happen. And there was probably like 3 of them. They got hundreds of thousands of new subs, and they're just churning out content for the game. And the game's great, and it was really successful. But there was no established relationship between the publisher of that game and those influencers. And because of that, as soon as Genshin Impact came out, all 3 of them either started a new channel for Genshin Impact altogether, which is crazy, and didn't even go back to the game, or just started making videos for Genshin Impact and ignored the other game altogether. So just like, I've not been in the position of a developer, but I would, if somebody, even if I was developing a game and somebody had 5,000 or 10,000 subs, I'd be like, how do I lock this guy in forever? Like, this is so important, and that, you know, this, like, obviously my players love them if they're getting hundreds of thousands of views. I want to make sure that forever this guy's making content for my game. Okay, so these are things that you can do to nurture your influencers. Let's see, is there any we want to, a promotion, a really great example of promotion that I don't see a lot, that I wish I saw more, was Summoner's War. When you load up the game, they have like a slider of all their influencers, and it's like, this streamer does this content and has this many viewers, and then the next, and it's like, this YouTuber has this many subs and does this type of content. Next, it's like, and it just goes like, there's like 8 of them or something while the game's loading up. And I don't even, you know, typically engage with anything while a game's loading up. And it's totally a good use of time, and it's a good use of promoting those guys, so that, again, they can build a lifestyle on your game. It's free for you. Now, like, something in here as far as promotion that is maybe more controversial is like establishing a like actual consulting contract or contract relationship to lock those influencers into your game as long as you possibly can. You know, based off some of the examples I just gave you, you could realize how detrimental that is, because when a YouTuber with 200,000 subs probably means it's getting, you know, maybe 1 million uniques a month or something. People, and they leave, then the players think, well, maybe I should leave. Maybe I should try this other game. And if the influencer never goes back, they're going to think, why should I go back? This other one's better. So if you can lock those in and not allow that to happen, that'd be fantastic. Some of the other things that you can enlist them on and pay them real money for, in addition to real currency, is gathering feedback for you. Although often they do that on their own, but if there's like kind of an extensive way you want them to do that in terms of a big report or something, that's something to consider. If you want them to create like really thorough unofficial or official guides, you know, my experience is that I've seen publishers try to say, we'll give you 500 gems to whoever submits a good guide that meets these requirements. They just don't turn out well. It's just, I think that real money is a huge differentiator. And if you can, you know, maybe pick the best of the people who will do it for in-game currency, and then pay them real money to do the rest, that's maybe a good idea. And then if somebody wants to be like if somebody's willing to be a dedicated moderator for you and save your community manager or your team just hundreds and hundreds of hours, then I think that you should pay them, because as soon as you lose that moderator, you're going to be sad, and it's going to be hard to find a real quality person that you can trust. Overinvest in the people that you can trust and that do really great things for your game, because think about this 99-1 rule here. 90% of your players are going to consume content in a drive-by. 9% will regularly check in and lurk, and 1% will create the content that the other 99% consumes. So the more that the bigger that your 1% is, the more of your 99% you can support. And we're going to get into some different influencer types later, but you want to support all the various influencer types because they're going to support various different types of your 99%. All right, why players quit. Number 3, got this pretty outrageous graphic here. But so they start out engaged and they either get bored or they run into some sort of issue and they get frustrated. Now, I think that solving the frustration problem is relatively easy by either changing the game or leveraging a customer support to compensate someone or revert something back or something like that. So if there's a frustration, it's relatively easy to fix. I guess my expertise comes more into the what if somebody gets bored. These are the frustrations. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about these, but like, let's see, buyer's remorse is something I want to just focus on as the only one here on this slide. But like, lately, I feel like the number of in-app purchases within a game are really like blowing up for free-to-play, mid to hardcore genre. There's just so many options, and it's really frustrating when I spend $50 and I blow through the currency, and then I realize, maybe I should have bought this other thing. And it's like, okay, maybe I can like handle that like 1 or 2 times, but like if it keeps happening, if there's so many options and it's hard to really narrow down like what purchase is the best for me and helps me make great progress, then I'm probably gonna go find a game that's easier for me to spend money in and feel good about myself and not feel guilty for spending that. And I feel like I didn't get the enjoyment out of it because like, I feel like there's sort of like this low key, like we're going to give them all these options and let people choose for like what they need, but not be like super clear about what would be best. And then like, if they make the wrong purchases, that's kind of good for us. It's like more profit margin or something. And like, I don't know, that's just kind of how it feels as a player sometimes. And yeah. Okay. And then the next one here. So when we're talking about a player getting bored and how do we re-engage them into the game, these are some different ways that they can be re-engaged. From the community perspective, this is what I see. Some of these ideas I want to touch on that are like so important. So an influencer that you like is still playing, that second bullet point there under social. It's like the fact that like Dr. Disrespect like still plays PUBG makes me want to go play PUBG. You know, like when Shroud goes back and like plays Apex Legends like in a new update, I'm like, shoot, that looks pretty sick. Maybe I should go play Apex again. But in the case of those YouTubers, if they never go back to that original game that they started out on, I trusted them, I followed them, and I'm gonna follow them where they're going next. So yeah, and in a lot of cases in the communities that we build, we see people that run into these like life barriers at the bottom right here, like they run out of money or they run out of time, like they have a kid or they're like getting married or something, and so they take like a couple weeks off or like a month off, and then they come back and they're like, oh, it's been like I haven't been able to play, but I've been hanging out in the community that you guys created. If you guys weren't still here, I probably wouldn't play again, but like I'm following with like all these things that are coming out, and it's making me like I've been always wanted to play, I just didn't have the time. So yeah, it's awesome. You see that happen a lot. Another like social reason that somebody might come back or remain playing in your game, like getting re-engaged after getting bored. We got a story from our director of community development, and he says when he was playing World of Warcraft many years ago, he'd been playing for a while, him and his friends. His friends kind of got bored and fell off the game, and he was still playing, paying $15 a month, kind of wondering like, I like the game, but I don't know, there's nothing that's really really holding me in here right now. I think I'm gonna quit. And then one of the leaders in his alliance or in his guild reaches out to him and offers him a leadership position. And he's like, hey, you've been really dedicated. You've been here a long time. Why don't you come lead with me? And he got super excited. He's like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah, like I still like the game. I just didn't really have a reason to stay. Now I have responsibility. Now I have people depending on me. And yeah, so this is great. I'll keep playing. And the leader didn't offer that to him because he was going to leave. It just kind of happened one day. And now even many years later, he still plays the game, super engaged in the most recent update for a while. Excited for him to experience that. Okay, let's look at another point here. Yeah, so like I've talked a little bit about, let's see, bullet point 4 under social, like you get connected to an entertaining community outside the game. Like I joined a game recently. I really wanted to play an MMO on mobile, really big game that just came out, and got in to just join an alliance. And then within like 5 days, like half the alliance was vacant. The leader hadn't logged in 48 hours. And I'm just sitting there like, this is so bummed. I'm so bummed out. Like I want to get involved in this game, but like there's no, like I need to find another way to do it, because like it's really hard to find an active alliance in game. So first thing I do is I go to the Discord, because you can't really, it's hard to like find, it's hard to be like, go on Reddit and be like, hey, who's in, so-and-so alliance, and can I join it in so-and-so server? It's hard for that, like to really get penetration on Reddit when there's so much content out there. So I'll go to the Discord and I'll ask around and try to find a leader who's really engaged and trying to build a strong team. And that's how I really find a place inside of a game. So don't underestimate those. Even encourage players to go into Discord and find or connect with players. Maybe don't say find an active alliance, but I think we've all experienced the problem where if you don't do a game with friends, if you go in solo, it's very difficult to find like a dedicated active alliance. And it makes such a difference though, so whether or not you want to keep playing, because it helps you really achieve the goals. And that there's a lot of elements you can't even experience in the game if you don't have an active alliance. Okay, so the pitfall here in preventing players from quitting is that you don't have access. Okay, cool. Got a warning that we've got a lot of questions. I'll hurry up. So the pitfall here is that you don't have access to like enough player perspectives or the will to listen to them. And then so what happens is, like, if you have that crew of influencers supporting you, reactive and proactive feedback, then you will be able to identify very quickly why players are trying to fall off or issues that they're having that might not just be general like the ones I mentioned, but very specific to your game. All right, number 4, the key to player retention, nurturing relationships between your players. I've really talked about it a lot already. This is a beautiful picture of one of our team members on the right there, the lady Carol, and her daughter Izzy, and her boyfriend Sal. And they met in Game of War like 6 years ago, and their child is now 1 year old, and they still play. And Carol is on our team. She's been working with us for 2.5 years, and she knows every whale in the game. She knows every detail about the game, and she's constantly informing the developers about things they never even knew about, they've never heard of, that are going on behind the scenes. So yeah, when you're wanting to nurture those relationships, the pitfall is like relying too much on like, oh, well, our game has a chat and it has an alliance system. I think that's like, there's often not a lot of effort, and those things can be broken. Like So for example, like if you're like that story of that game where I'm in the alliance and like the people go inactive and I want to switch, well, I'm actually penalized for leaving and I can't join an alliance for a period of time. And like, I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, come on, you got to understand that like this happens all the time, especially early game. And there shouldn't really be any penalties until like the late game in terms of the alliance. So utilize some external tools like Discord, Line, or Slack. Yes, I've heard Slack being used as fan communities in game. Pretty interesting. So you're not in the business of making chat tools. Some angles to look at this. You know, you're in the business of making games. So leverage chat tools where you can. The in-game chat can be relatively like busy, like, oh, this person like recruited a 4-star whatever, 5-star whatever, beat this level or achieved this accomplishment. And there's just like all this stuff going on. It's, I don't know, it's kind of in the way. The third angle is like, you want people to connect even while they can't play the game. So like, you know, they're at work, they're probably not going to get in trouble for like being on Discord necessarily, but if they're like actually playing a game, that's going to be an issue. Same thing at home. Sometimes you're like with kids or with, you know, your spouse, and you want to connect to the game, you want to connect to your team, but you can't be in the game. So they'll leverage these outside tools. Or they want to share things like links or videos or pictures and build relationships. And it's difficult to do that in a game. Most games don't let you do that. So that's what, you know, those tools are really great for. All right, number 5, finding and rewarding key community members. We could just say influencers here. I'm only going to cover the last 2 because you know content creators, you know leaders, you know socializers, but VIPs are very influential as trendsetters and idols within the community. If we have line rooms of 500 people, and you know, whenever there's a VIP in there saying, look at this new strategy I just tried, or look at this new feature I just purchased and how good it is, then like everyone's like, man, I want that, you know, and they're just idolize these guys and they want to be on their team. They want to be associated to them. They want to be praised by them. So definitely want to have relationships, right, with all these guys. I've talked about that crew. This is all the people you want in your crew. I think the one that's most overlooked is your ninjas. They're like quiet. They don't talk in the community very often, but they're like always a top ranked player. And they're just so good at your game. And people know about them. They're like, who is that guy? Like, he's in the room, he doesn't really talk. They try to talk to him. Sometimes they'll talk, but he's just like wicked smart, might even have a totally different style than a lot of people. Definitely pay attention to those guys. The pitfall with finding and rewarding influencers is choosing the wrong players to support. This is tricky when this is tricky when there's people who are really influential or maybe spend a lot of money in your game and you want their feedback, but you can't bundle those players. You can't bundle those guys with other like more healthy players in your crew. Like they'll really just dominate and take over and ruin the environment. So, you know, it's really don't support those players. Here's like the type of qualities that you want to look for when you're supporting. Number 1 is like encouraging, and like if someone's encouraging, it's really like an indicator of so many other things. Like they're going to be friendly, relational, helpful. So encouraging is kind of the number 1 thing you want to look for. Then of course trustworthy, because if you're going to get proactive feedback or you're going to be communicating with them, you want them to be trusted. And then third, knowledgeable, and they, you know, you want them to for sure know more about your game than you do, at least in some areas, or know far more about your community or player base than you do. And that happens all the time. Like, don't be surprised by that. That's for sure there. There's like this quote that's like, the only time you know more about your game is before it launches. And the same is true with your community. The only time you know more about your community is before it launches. Okay, so yeah, the 2 most important and useful things you can do for your players are nurturing relationships with them between players and offering them great guides. Because as gamers, we want to progress, we want to be better, we want to be better than the next person, we want to learn. We want to stay up to date with the meta. We don't want to fall behind. Guides solve a lot of those problems. Number 6 is just how transparency and authenticity builds trust. So I think like a key takeaway here is going to be this sentence here on the top: when your players don't feel listened to, their natural inclination is going to be to try and shout louder and louder and louder and be more ridiculous and say more extreme things than the last time, because what typically happens is if they get extreme enough, then they start to get a response. And then you're like, oh, okay, so that's what it takes to get a response. And then you're reinforcing this negative behavior. So one of the recommendations I have is, if you see the way to don't address like all negative feedback individually because you're reinforcing negative behavior, but respond to complaints like kind of as a general like blog post somewhere, and not just responding, but like as an update to the game as you're changing things. Be like, hey, we noticed players weren't that happy with this, so we changed it like this. Here's our intention. Be really specific about that and be transparent. And I think that will prevent a lot of this like extreme toxicity. These are the steps if you have extreme toxicity to take: admitting your mistake. It's just like any relationship, with your spouse. You're going to admit your mistakes, you're going to validate her feelings, and then you're going to show a commitment to change. Don't minimize your players' feelings. Like, they're there and they're just like anyone else that you know. So some classic examples are like Machine Zone will send an in-game mail and address a problem. Hey, we know this is a problem. We notice it has affected you. We sincerely apologize, and as a token of our appreciation, we've given you some supplies. So that's like the classic one. Like, at a bare minimum, you got to do that. This is like an example of a resolution for a frustration. And then the other one is this is with the 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross. They have this big blog post that I can send the link out to, but it's really cool. It happened like 2 months into the game, and they kind of made a big mistake with an event in order to achieve a certain goal. And they acknowledge here that their main focus was to increase player satisfaction, but they failed, and that they were monitoring forum and social media and realized people were disappointed, and they really apologize, and they're going to take a whole bunch of steps, and they like have this massive post of all these steps they're going to do to gain people's trust back and not cause disappointment in future updates. So good example of listening and committing to change. So I mentioned this already. Don't minimize your mistakes. That is like the detriment to any relationship. Just accept it. It's okay. People will forgive you if they like your game, and they just want things to be better. They just want change. That's it. So I understand it's difficult, mainly when you have to like make a big pivot. But if you have this crew of influencers and they really help you inform your decisions and give you ideas, then I think you can do it successfully. All right, thank you for listening. I guess we have questions. I'm sorry that we don't have enough time. I'll try to answer some, but feel free to leave some questions on our GamerSpeak LinkedIn. I have a post about the conference, and I'd love to answer them there as well.
Oh, it was great, man. Indy's gonna run and get our next session ready, so I'm gonna scroll up and start going through this. Let's see, and keep in mind, everybody, that we've got the Discord channel as well. Sorry, I'm cleaning up my my streaming materials. So from the Discord, how do you go about building that initial community?
Yeah, I'd recommend. I love to recommend Discord or Line, something where you can chat with people very quickly and fast, and where you can kind of segregate different interests of people. So I'm not really sure at what stage this person is saying initial community, but I think leveraging the earliest players that you have, and what Proletariat recommends in their article on 12 lessons they learned in their pre-alpha is forcing people who want to play your game to be in the Discord in a pre-alpha phase, even through beta. If they want to play, they got to be in your Discord, or heavily incentivize it. I love that.
So the next one from some more 79 on Twitch. what's your opinion on developer-made social spaces when it comes to fostering a community of players? To clarify, developers nowadays tend to rely on pre-established social media, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. When it comes to their communities, built-in social elements like chat rooms are often left featureless or even non-existent. For small developers, is it worth it to put dev time into back-end social features when social media already exists?
Nah, I made this point in my presentation, like leverage the chat tools you have. There's just no way that you can build I don't think it's worth building the tools. I think it's worth just using the other tools really well and using and leveraging the advantages they have.
And from Cybergot on Twitch, what's a good way to welcome in good community players? Apparently, not the right answer.
Yeah, I think just talk to them. Like, remember, you're going to force the social connection, and then when they get in there and you notice somebody that is, wow, this person's smart, wow, this person's thorough, this person's encouraging, you know, send them a DM and say, hey, thank you so much for you know, being so involved in our community. It's so helpful, it's very meaningful to us. You know, reach out if you have, you know, any issues or whatever, and start to kind of vet that person to see if you want them in your crew.
So from Nightwolf, how different are the steps between getting an influencer to play your game and sponsoring an influencer? Does in-game versus monetary payment differ depending on which route you go to get an influencer?
Yeah, what I've liked is like public programs that are like, if you are an influencer that gets to like, is creating content and you have like this many subs or something, like we can give you some in-game currency, and it's sort of like this very like transparent, like we want to support you playing the game, we understand the value that we provide, and you can give them some in-game currency there. And then also just having the relationship, like treat them as a VIP, you know, give them a relationship with somebody on your team and say, reach out to us if there's anything urgent that you want to talk about. I think that's like the most casual way to do it. But I think take it a step further. If you think that losing that person is going to be a huge detriment to your game, then try to go as far as you can to sponsor them. You know, feature them in your game, feature them on your Discord, do an interview with them. Like, yeah, make them successful.
The other big part of that is it doesn't cost you any money to give them in-game currency, whereas it, you know, real world currency gets expensive. But especially for smaller devs, you know, you're going to be, if the influencer is open to it, you're much better off giving them in-game currency.
We talked about this, like this is sort of a challenge, like, but like in the case of, I gave some examples of like ones that you absolutely cannot lose. I think it's worth paying them money if you absolutely can't lose someone.
So how do you find out why a player actually quit?
Yeah, I think the best way is to have that crew of influencers that are connected to like hundreds of players, and they know why people are quitting. They just, because they're in the community reading the chat, and you know, when they get to know those people. I think, you know, that's the best way to do like exit surveys. No one's going to really answer an exit survey via an email or something, but that's the way that we have the most success. Just saying, people are really leaving because of this frustration if it doesn't get resolved, or people have left because of this frustration and they continue to. Yeah, good question.
All right, so we got time for one more, and then we're going to get to our next speaker. But you know, regarding in-app purchases, is it better to put the lower priced in-app purchases out front or the $100 ones? Because lately I've been seeing a lot of apps pushing the $100 ones.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I guess I don't. So a couple of thoughts is like, people I don't think aren't as, they're getting really comfortable with seeing expensive purchases, like $100 purchases. But I feel like there's some data on your game that's really going to tell you like what it is, and if you can have like responsivity to that, that's great. I think I see the larger percent of the player base is going to engage more with sales, packs that are on sales. So those tend to be first, even if they're, those tend to be first. Those tend to be the ones I engage with most, and I hear about players engaging with most is like, that's something they like, it goes on sale, it's in the front. they want to buy it.
And part of that could be because for the last 8 months, there's been a lot more people buying that $100 option. And so, from the publisher standpoint or from the developer standpoint, as long as the rest of the payment options are out there and available, and the player does know that it's not necessarily $100 or nothing, why not push the $100 option? I mean, you've got it in there, and obviously right now people are paying it. So,
yeah,
give them the option.
The other thing besides a sale, Jay, I would say that is like the relevance. Like if it's like, hey, you just hit level 40 and this is our level 40 sale. I'm like, those are like always a huge pull for me. Like I feel like I just earned it, and this sale is especially good for me at this stage in the game.
A good example of that is Gems of War, and I've been playing that a lot lately. And it's like when you get to a new zone or you clear it, it's like, oh, well, here's this weapon that's specifically for this zone. Do you want to buy it for $10? And I'm like, no, it's not the bear one. I only want the bear one. That's all I want. Oh, Chad, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of this knowledge. And any of you out there have more questions, that you want to pick his brain about, I assure you that his team does good work and they know their stuff. Go to our Discord. It's discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. And you can ask any of the 2,000 some other industry professionals that are in there and Chad questions about community management and building. And I just popped a link up earlier to actually, you're right, we do have time for one more question, Chad. Who's the capable community manager who helped you build this presentation?
Oh my gosh, wow. I think his name rhymes with the same name that I just saw pop up on screen there.
I'm sure, I'm actually impressed that it took them this long to get in here and start roasting at you. So
I'll throw out his name. I mean, you can look it up, but Casey, he's on our LinkedIn. He did a great job to really help me with a lot of things on this, no doubt.
All right. So if you got more questions on community management, we also now, thanks to Sri, have our entire YouTube list organized. So you can literally go to the Discord and type --community, and you'll get this whole big old playlist that comes up from 150 some episodes of this show that we've been doing. But with that, Chad, thank you so much for stopping by. So the stream's going to go down for a moment, and then it's going to pop back up with Carly from Night Dive Studios, speaking on something that's very important at the moment: mental health and working remote, and how she has managed as Night Dive's community manager to keep in touch with not only the community, but with her team, and to make sure that everybody's doing okay. So yeah, we'll be back in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.